Lufthansa Flight 181 was a Boeing 737-230 ADV aircraft named Landshut that was hijacked on 13 October 1977 by 4 members of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, who called themselves Commando Martyr Halima. The objective of the hijacking was to secure the release of imprisoned Red Army faction leaders. On 18 October the aircraft was stormed by the West German counter-terrorism group GSG-9 in Mogadishu, Somalia, and all 86 passengers rescued. The rescue operation was codenamed Feuerzauber. The hijacking is considered to be part of the German Autumn. Lufthansa crew, 2 flight crew and 3 cabin crew operated the round-trip flight from Frankfurt to Palma de Mallorca. Jürgen Schumann, captain, born at Colditz in 1940, a former Luftwaffe Lockheed F-104 starfighter pilot, on 16 October at Aden Airport, after being permitted to leave the aircraft to check the plane's airworthiness, he went to talk to authorities. He subsequently returned and was then murdered by terrorist leader hijacked. Posthumously awarded the German Federal Cross of Merit First Class, he was survived by his wife and 2 sons. The building housing the Lufthansa Pilot School in Bremen was named in his honor, as was a street in the Bavarian city of Landshut. He is buried in Babenhausen in Hesse. Jürgen Virtor, co-pilot, born at Kassel in 1942, a former German Navy pilot. He piloted the Landshut from Aden to Mogadishu. He returned to work just 6 weeks after the hijacking, and the first aircraft he was assigned to was the Landshut, which had already been returned to service. He retired in 1999. He was also awarded the German Federal Cross of Merit First Class. He subsequently returned the medal in December 2008 in protest over the release on probation of former Red Army faction terrorist Christian Klar, who had been involved in the kidnap and murder of Hans Martin Schleyer in 1977. Hannelore Piegler, chief stewardess; Anna Maria Steininger, stewardess; Gabrielle Dillman, stewardess. She was dubbed the Angel of Mogadishu by the German press. Like Schumann and Virtor, she was awarded the German Federal Cross of Merit. She subsequently married Lufthansa pilot Rutger von Lutzer. As Gabrielle von Lutzer, she has acquired an international reputation as a sculptor, and has exhibited in numerous exhibitions in Germany and throughout Europe. Key German rescue personnel: Colonel Ulrich Wegner, Federal Border Protection Officer who was the liaison officer with the German Interior Ministry at the time of the Munich massacre by the PLO during the 1972 Olympic Games. He was subsequently appointed by the West German government to establish and lead an elite anti-terrorist squad. The unit was officially established on 17 April 1973 as a part of Germany's Federal Border Guard Service, and the name GSG-9 stood for Grenzschutzgruppe 9 and was chosen simply because the Bundesgrenzschutz already had 8 regular border guard groups. At the outset, Wegner trained with both the British Shash and the Israeli Sayeret Matkal, who were the only known established anti-terrorist units in the world at the time. He also participated in the rescue of Israeli hostages in Operation Entebbe in 1976. Wegner planned and commanded the GSG-9 Operation Fire Magic to successfully rescue the Landshut hostages at Mogadishu. After his retirement from GSG-9, Wegner worked as a consultant to help establish counter-terrorism units for various foreign countries. Wegner is currently a member of the KOTA GmbH and AMP Co. KG Verwaltungsdienstleistung and Security Committee. Major Klaus Blatt, deputy commander of GSG-9 in 1977 and one of the 4 assault squad leaders that stormed the Landshut at Mogadishu. When Wagner retired, he succeeded him as the next commander of GSG-9. Minister Hans-Jürgen Wisniewski, Minister of State at the Federal Chancellery, who was designated by Chancellor Helmut Schmidt as his special envoy to coordinate the political negotiations with the various foreign governments to facilitate the release or rescue of the Landshut hostages. Due to his excellent contacts and personal relationships with Arab leaders, he was nicknamed Ben Wish by the German press. He lost office after the CDU regained power in 1982 and became a traveling consultant to Arab, African and South American countries, advising them on negotiating techniques and pacification policies to deal with terrorist and insurgent groups. He died in 2005. Chancellor Helmut Schmidt, German Federal Chancellor between 1974 and 1982, who adopted a tough, uncompromising stance over the kidnapping of Hans-Martin Schleyer and the Lufthansa 181 hijacking in 1977. He authorized the GSG-9 mission to rescue the Landshut hostages, and his anti-terrorist policies were successful in overcoming the long-standing threat that had been posed by the Red Army faction. After retiring from the Bundestag in 1986, he was one of the founders of the committee supporting the EMU and the creation of the European Central Bank. He died in 2015. Hijacking. At 11 a.m. on Thursday, the 13th of October 1977, Lufthansa Flight LH-181, a Boeing 737 named Landshut, took off from Palma de Mallorca en route to Frankfurt with 86 passengers and 5 crew, piloted by Jürgen Schumann, with co-pilot Jürgen Virtor at the controls. About 30 minutes later, as it passed over Marseille, the aircraft was hijacked by 4 militants calling themselves Commando Martyr Halima in honor of fellow militant Brigitte Kuhlmann, who had been killed in Operation Entebbe the previous year. The leader was a Palestinian named Sohair Youssef Akake, who adopted the alias Captain Martyr Mahmoud. The other 3 were Suhail Asser, a Palestinian, and 2 Lebanese people, Oab al-Harb and Hind Alameh. Akake burst into the cockpit with a loaded pistol in his hand and ordered Virtor to join the passengers, leaving Schumann to take over the flight controls. Mahmoud ordered Schumann to fly to Larnaca in Cyprus, but was told that they had insufficient fuel and would have to land in Rome first. The aircraft changed course and landed in Rome for refueling. Acting in concert with the Red Army faction group the Siegfried Hausner Commando, who had kidnapped West German industrialist Hans-Martin Schleyer 5 weeks earlier, demanded the release of 10 Red Army faction terrorists detained at the JVA Stuttgart Stammheim prison, plus 2 Palestinian compatriots held in Turkey, and $15 million. German Interior Minister Werner Mayhofer contacted his Italian counterpart Francesco Cossiga and suggested that the plane's tires should be shot out to prevent the aircraft from leaving. After consulting his colleagues, Cossiga decided that the most desirable solution for the Italian government was to get rid of the problem altogether. The aircraft was refueled, which enabled Mahmoud to instruct Virtor to take off for Larnaca at 5:45 p.m. without even obtaining clearance from Rome air traffic control. Larnaca. The Landshut landed in Larnaca at 8:28 p.m. After about an hour, a local PLO representative arrived at the airport and over the radio tried to persuade Mahmoud to release the hostages. This only provoked a furious response from Mahmoud, who started screaming at him over the intercom in Arabic until the PLO representative gave up and left. The aircraft was then refueled and Schumann asked flight control for a routing to Beirut. He was told that Beirut airport was blocked and closed to them, and Mahmoud just said to him that they would go to Damascus instead. The Landshut took off at 10:50 p.m. heading for Beirut but was refused landing permission. After also being denied landing permission in Damascus, Baghdad and Kuwait, they headed for Bahrain. Schumann was told by a passing Qantas airliner that Bahrain airport was closed. He radioed flight control and told them they had insufficient fuel to go elsewhere, and despite being told again that the airport was closed, he was suddenly given an automatic landing frequency by the flight controller. They finally landed in Bahrain at 1:52 a.m. the following morning. On arrival, the aircraft was immediately surrounded by armed troops, and Mahmoud radioed the tower that unless they were withdrawn he would shoot the co-pilot. After a standoff with the tower, with Mahmoud setting a 5-minute deadline and holding a pistol to Vata's head, the troops were subsequently withdrawn. The aircraft was then refueled and they took off for Dubai. Approaching Dubai, they were again refused landing permission. Overflying the airport in the early light of dawn, they could see that the runway was blocked with trucks and fire engines. Running short of fuel, Schumann told the tower they would have to land anyway. As they made a low pass over the airport, they saw that the obstacles were being removed, and at 5:40 a.m. Vitor was able to make a normal landing on the main runway. In Dubai, the terrorists asked the tower to supply water, food, medicine and newspapers, and to take away the rubbish. Captain Jürgen Schumann was able to communicate the number of hijackers on board, as well as that they were 2 men and 2 women. In an interview with journalists, this information was revealed by Dubai's Sheikh Mohammed, then Minister of Defense. The hijackers learned about this possibly from the radio, causing Mahmoud to threaten to kill Schumann. The aircraft remained on the ground at Dubai all through the day and night. The following morning, Mahmoud threatened to start shooting hostages if the aircraft was not refueled, and the Dubai authorities finally agreed. In the meantime, both Hans-Jürgen Wisniewski, the West German minister responsible for handling the hijacking, and Colonel Ulrich Wegner, commander of the elite German anti-terrorist squad GSG-9, had arrived in Dubai to try to persuade the government to agree to let GSG-9 commandos into Dubai to storm the aircraft. However, after permission was granted for GSG-9 commandos to storm the aircraft, Shash and GSG-9 senior operatives insisted on additional combat exercise and dry runs on an adjacent airstrip. Reports suggest up to 2,720 minutes of supplementary training was conducted whilst based in Dubai. While Wegner was considering his options, the Landshut had completed its refueling, and at 12:20 a.m. it took off, heading for Salalah in Oman, where landing permission was once again denied, and a course to Aden in South Yemen, at the limit of the fuel range, was established. In Aden they were yet again denied landing permission, and the 2 main runways were blocked by vehicles. The plane was running low on fuel, so the pilot Vitor had no choice but to make an emergency landing on a sand strip almost parallel to both runways. The Aden authorities told the hijackers that they would have to leave, but the 2 pilots were skeptical of the condition of the aircraft after an emergency landing on sandy ground. Mahmoud consequently gave Schumann permission to leave the aircraft in order to check the condition of the landing gear following the rough landing, and the engines. However, Schumann did not immediately return to the plane after the inspection, even after numerous attempts to recall him or even a threat to blow up the aircraft on the ground. The reasons for his prolonged absence remain unclear, and some reports suggest that Schumann asked the Yemeni authorities to prevent the continuation of the flight and to accede to the terrorist demands. After this, Schumann returned to the aircraft to face the wrath of Mahmoud, who forced him to kneel on the floor in the passenger cabin and then shot him in the head without giving him a chance to explain himself. The plane was refueled at 6 a.m. on the 17th of October and, coaxed by co-pilot Jürgen Virtor, it slowly and laboriously took off from Aden on course for the Somali capital of Mogadishu. At around 6:22 a.m. a local time, Landshut made an unannounced and perfect landing in Mogadishu. The leader Mahmoud told Virtor that he had performed a superhuman accomplishment and that consequently he was free to leave the aircraft, since they were not planning to fly elsewhere. However, Virtor opted to remain with the onboard passengers and crew. Schumann's body was thrown onto the tarmac and an ultimatum was set for the RAF prisoners to be released by 4 p.m. a local time, or the aircraft would be blown up. After they had poured the duty-free spirits over the hostages in preparation for the destruction of the aircraft, the hijackers were told that the West German government had agreed to release the RAF prisoners, but that the transfer to Mogadishu would take several more hours, so they agreed to extend the deadline to 2:30 a.m. the next morning. Operation Feuerzauber. Meanwhile, while the West German Chancellor Helmut Schmidt attempted to negotiate an agreement with Somali President Siad Barre, Special Envoy Hans-Jürgen Wisniewski and GSG-9 Commander Ulrich Wegner arrived at Mogadishu Airport from Jeddah in a Lufthansa aircraft, co-piloted by Rudiger von Lutzer. In West Germany, a team of 30 GSG-9 commandos under the Deputy Commander Major Klaus Blatt had assembled at Angela Airfield near Bonn awaiting instructions. The commandos took off from Cologne-Bonn Airport on a Boeing 707 on Monday morning, planning to fly to Djibouti within a short flying time of Somalia, while Schmidt negotiated with the Somalis. When they were flying over Ethiopia, agreement was reached and permission was given to land at Mogadishu. The aircraft landed at 8 p.m. a local time with all lights out to avoid detection by the hijackers. After 4 hours to unload all of their equipment and to undertake the necessary reconnaissance, Wegner and Blatt finalized the assault plan, scheduled to start at 2 a.m. a local time. They decided to approach from the rear of the aircraft in its blind spot in 6 teams, using black-painted aluminium ladders to gain access to the aircraft through the escape hatches under the fuselage and via the doors over the wings. In the meantime, a fictitious progress report on the journey being taken by the released prisoners was being fed to Mahmoud by the German representatives in the airport tower. Just after 2 a.m., Mahmoud was told that the plane carrying the prisoners had just departed from Cairo after refueling, and he was asked to provide the conditions of the prisoner-hostage exchange over the radio. Several minutes before the rescue, Somali soldiers lit a fire 65 yards in front of the jet as a diversionary tactic, prompting Akake and 2 of the other 3 hijackers to rush to the cockpit to observe what was going on, and isolating them from the hostages in the cabin. At 2:07 a.m. a local time, the GSG-9 commandos silently climbed up the blackened aluminium ladders and opened the emergency doors. Wegner, at the head of one group, opened the forward door, and 2 other groups, led by Sergeant Major Dieter Fox and Sergeant Joachim Wemmer, stormed the aircraft by using the ladders to climb up onto the wings and opened both emergency doors at the same time, shouting in German for the passengers and crew to hit the floor. The commandos shot and killed 2 of the terrorists, and wounded Sohair Akake and Suhaila Sayer. Akake died of his injuries hours later. One GSG-9 commando was wounded by return fire from the terrorists. 3 passengers and a flight attendant were slightly wounded in the crossfire. An American passenger aboard the plane described the rescue: "I saw the door open and a man appears. His face was painted black and he starts shouting in German, 'We're here to rescue you, get down.' And they started shooting. The emergency escape chutes were deployed and passengers and crew were ordered to quickly evacuate the aircraft. At 2:12 a.m. local time, just 5 minutes after the assault had commenced, the commandos radioed Feuerzauber, which was the code word for the successful completion of the operation. A few moments later, a radio signal was sent to Chancellor Schmidt in Bonn. 4 opponents down, hostages free, 4 hostages slightly wounded, 1 commando slightly wounded. The rescuers escorted all 86 passengers to safety, and a few hours later they were all flown to Cologne-Bonn Airport, where they landed in the early afternoon of Tuesday, the 18th of October, and were given a hero's welcome. Aftermath. News of the rescue of the hostages was followed by the deaths of RAF members Andreas Bader, Gudrun Enslen and Jan Karl Rasper at JVA Stuttgart Stammheim. RAF member Irmgard Moller also attempted suicide but survived her injuries. On Wednesday, the 19th of October, the body of Hans Martin Schleyer, who had been kidnapped by the RAF some 5 weeks prior to the hijacking, was found in the boot of a car on a side street in Mulhouse after the RAF heard of the deaths of the comrades. They contacted the Paris newspaper Liberation to announce his execution. A subsequent post-mortem examination indicated that he had been killed the previous day. After the Landshut crisis, the German government stated that it would never again negotiate with terrorists. Chancellor Helmut Schmidt was widely praised internationally for his decision to storm the aircraft to rescue the hostages. The aircraft, while the hijackers had control of the plane that had traveled over 6,000 miles. The Landshut was a Boeing 737-230C named after the city of Landshut in Bavaria. It was returned to service by Lufthansa after a thorough check and overhaul a few weeks later. It was sold by Lufthansa in 1985 to a Brazilian carrier. The Brazilian carrier TAF Linhas Aéreas stopped service of the aircraft under the registration PT-Entebbe in January 2008, owing to severe damage. The name Landshut is still used by Lufthansa today, currently on an Airbus A330. Notable hostages. Horst Gregorio Canellas, German football official responsible for breaking the 1971 Bundesliga scandal, was one of the hostages on board, together with his daughter. In popular culture, the song 122 Hours of Fear by the Screamers, recorded in 1978, was inspired by the hijacking. The song Wrath by Brian Eno and Snatch was created using sound elements from a Baader Meinhof ransom message available by public telephone at the time of the hijacking. The hijacking and the hostage rescue operation were portrayed in 2 German television films, Todesspiel in 1997 and Mogadishu, directed by Roland Souza Richter, in 2008. The hijacking and rescue was also portrayed in the Black Ops television series, Season 2 Episode 6, titled Operation Fire Magic.